for those who are just joining us, this is the second day of Collingwood World Summit Habitat in Towns 2021. It's a global gathering to continue the dialogue on how towns, small cities, and Indigenous communities have a key role to play in fostering sustainable development, the realization of the SDGs, as well as climate action. It is my honor now to introduce to you Mayor Maya Tate. She will be moderating Town Resilience in the Face of Climate Emergency, Lessons Learned from BC Fire Forests. Mayor Tate was first elected to Zouk Council in 2008, and she served 2 consecutive terms on council before being elected as mayor in 2014 and again in 2018. While serving in office, Mayor Tate has represented the interests of the Zouk residents on many panels throughout the region and the province. I now introduce you. Thank you, Mayor Tate, and I hand it to you. We are muting you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be with you today. Okay, that's the technology. Okay, so welcome to theme 3. Our topic today is Town Resiliency in the Face of a Climate Emergency, Lessons Learned from BC Forest Fires. Again, my name is Maya Tate, and I'm very pleased to be serving as your moderator for this session. I'm joining you today virtually from the traditional territory of the Sauk Nation. So where is Zouk? Zouk is located on southern Vancouver Island, about 35 kilometers outside of the capital of Victoria. We are home to Canada's most signalized southwestern intersection, I should say most southern signalized intersection, population of roughly 14,000, growing every day. You can find us where the rainforest meets the sea. I'm very pleased to be chairing the BC Mayoral Roundtable. Did you know, this is an interesting fact, that the collective noun for mayors is magnificence? So we are going to have a magnificent time together, and I'm very pleased to be sharing this space with our fabulous, magnificent mayors. So a little bit of an introduction. Okay, so as you know, local governments are closest to the people, and while our mayors here may not be representing the our most populated centers, we have all the challenges of our urban communities. And in fact, in BC, the majority of our population lives in small and mid-sized communities. The mayors representing these communities are faced with all the challenges of the urban centers and many, many more. Affordability, homelessness, the opioid crisis, climate crisis, as well as earthquakes, flooding, rock slides, and wildfire. It's never a dull day for us in local government here in BC. BC mayors are on the front lines every day responding while ensuring that the necessary and essential services are provided to our communities. So joining us today from central BC, from the Thompson-Okanagan region, is Mayor Ward Stamer, the mayor of Barriere. Barriere is a small, friendly community with all the major conveniences of a city, offering a life of quiet, relaxed living. Ward himself has been the mayor since 2018. He has over 35 years of management experience in the forest industry, including log harvesting and log transportation, road construction and safety planning. He's a member of the BC Forest Safety Council and the entry-level Forest Workers Steering Committee. Joining us from northern BC, from the village of Fraser Lake, is Mayor Sarah Story. Now, Fraser Lake is home to sandy beaches, shorelines, it's where outdoor living reigns, and the fishing is fine. It's a playground of water and a natural wonderland. Sarah herself has served on council since 2015, becoming their first female mayor in 2018. During her tenure on council, she has served on many boards, including the North Central Local Government Association now for 5 years. In May of 2021, she completed her term as president and will remain on as past president on May 2022. She is also a director of the Union of BC Municipalities, the UBCM. Joining us from the coast north of Vancouver from Squamish will be Mayor Karen Elliott. Hardwired for adventure, Squamish is home to world-class mountain biking, kite surfing, rock climbing, and many more. Adventure seemingly awaits around every corner. Karen Elliott was elected as mayor in October of 2018 after serving as a mayor of Squamish Council from 2014 to 2018. She moved to Squamish in 2012 after spending 6 years abroad in Melbourne, Australia. Karen decided to run for elected office, but because she quickly realized the significant opportunities and challenges that lay ahead for Squamish as it experienced significant growth and big city pressures despite its small town feel. Joining us from the West Kootenay region of southern BC is Mayor Neil Ferguson, Mayor of Silverton. Silverton is BC's second smallest community. It's a former steamboat landing and was incorporated in 1930. Mayor Ferguson was elected in a 2021 by-election and affirmed into office right in the middle of wildfire season on July 7th. And then joining us from southeastern BC is Gary Schultz, the mayor of Revelstoke. Small town charm with big adventure tucked between the Monashee and Selkirk mountain ranges. Come fuel your fire within and experience the real Stoke. Mayor Schultz is known to be approachable and empathetic. These are traits that have been key components of his work as mayor and as CSRD municipal director. In his careers, both as a funeral director and now into political life, Mayor Schultz has spent more than 41 years in funeral service, listening to and helping families. He's a longtime community member, having lived in Revelstoke for over 34 years. In 2014, he brought his skills to local government, joining the city as a councillor and now advancing to the mayor's chair. So speakers, a bit today about process. We have a bit of more time. However, what I've done is I'm just going to limit each speaker to 8 minutes. So I will start the timer when you begin your presentation. When there's 30 seconds remaining, if you're still speaking, I will turn my camera on just so I don't disrupt you, but then I'll be cutting you off at the 8-minute line. However, if you have final thoughts to share, we'll have more time after every speaker has had the opportunity to present. I can go around and see if there's final thoughts. Then we'll get into a panel Q&A where we can do more sharing back and forth and engage a bit with our Zoom audience today. So with that, I would like to begin by getting my timer ready. And I would like Mayor Ward Stamer to come forward as our first speaker, please. And I'll hand that over to you. Thank you.
There we go. How's that?
It's wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
can
you.
you hear
We
me
can hear
okay?
you. Yes, we can.
Okay, it's not working very good on my end. I can't hear anything back, but I'll try to wing it. For some reason, my laptop all of a sudden stopped working. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
We can.
Great. Good morning, everybody. I guess good morning from here and afternoon everywhere else. I'm Ward Stamer. Yes, I've been the mayor since 2018. We are approximately 40 miles north of Kamloops. approximately 425 kilometers from Vancouver. And yes, we've had some significant challenges over the last few years with our fire seasons, and the reality that we all agree that it's getting drier, it's getting, the season is earlier. And, you know, what we've been able to find out is that we're going to have to adjust our system of being able to not only try to mitigate some of the issues that we're having with our forest fires, but also trying to get ahead of it. And I just wanted to briefly go over it a few minutes, just a couple of things. And I'm sure all the other mayors are on the same boat, in as much as that, you know, we rely on other agencies other than ourselves. You know, we've got a really good Fire Smart program in BC. I just found out that, you know, the web activity on their new system is like 600 times more than last year. So, I mean, our residents want to be engaged. They want to try to figure out what they can do themselves, whether it's, you know, fire smarting their properties, reduction of fuel loads, you know, being able to be integrated with other agencies and trying to determine what we can do with fuel breaks and those kinds of things. But what I wanted to really sort of touch about on from my perspective from this last season, a fire that we had in BC was quite something. I mean, the preliminary numbers are now going to be, it's going to be our most expensive fire season to date. And we probably burnt up almost as much as we've ever burnt up in a season with fires. And so what I wanted to put my focus towards, and what we're trying to do on a local basis, is get back to our preparedness and response with initial air attack, and, you know, what's involved with that. Because back in 2003, we had fires that were threatening our community. We had to evacuate. I was fortunate, I was one of the first ones back. We were able to fire guard, protect the town from burning down, and then we went out into the bush and tried to do what we could. But the number one thing that came back from the recommendations at that time was, you don't want to allow a small fire to become a large fire. And so in 2004, 2005, and subsequent years, the BC Forest Service was very adamant in making sure that if there was any smoke anywhere, they hid it. I mean, you could have had a fire in your house through the chimney, and you might have had a drop of air retardant. I mean, that's how aggressive everybody was. And then for whatever reason, that backed off. And now what we're finding is that we don't have the resources necessary to be able to stop these small fires becoming project fires. And that's unfortunate. And I think we got to get back to where we do have those resources, those boots on the ground, so that we can do what we can, you know, we can react as quickly as we possibly can. Locally, we have a small rapid attack truck that's tied to our fire department. We did have a lightning strike early in the season in June, just outside of our boundaries. We were able to follow the protocols, got permission to action it, and with the help of locals, we were able to suppress it very quickly. To the north of us, Sim First Nation, they've just purchased 2 rapid attack trucks. So we're trying to be as progressive as we can, but at the same time, we have to be able to be involved in the process with the BC Wildfire Service, so they're going to be in the same boat, so that we're not trying to stretch our resources out. And that's what I think is important. So it's kind of a two-phased approach. Yes, we want to be able to fire smart our properties. We want to be able to get professionals in to help us do, you know, a good assessment, whether it's fuel loads, whether it's grasses, brush, dead trees, you know, whatever we can do. But, you know, in all fairness, the city of our village of Lytton has been a recognized fire smart community since 2016. And unfortunately, their village burnt to the ground. And that was probably caused by having one section of their jurisdiction that was not fire smarted. And the fire was able to start there, continue through. And I was so saddened with the pictures of all these structures that were gone, and they were ringed with green grass. So obviously, you know, they could have done everything they possibly could to try to fire smart that property, but it still didn't stop the fire from burning. So I'm interested today to listen to what other communities are doing, you know, in their attempts to try to mitigate, you know, the fire hazard. But unfortunately, we all like to live around trees. We all like to live around things that are green. And because of our climate, it's getting so dry that everything will burn. And, you know, it's quite a daunting challenge, but I think we're up for it. So hopefully I didn't talk too quickly and go over too much stuff, but I know we've got a lot of work to do between now and the next fire season in the spring, and I'm looking forward to being part of the process. Thank you.
I think I'm just supposed to go next, Maya.
Sorry, I can't unmute myself, so that's where I'm waving. So if the host, please, if you can let me mute and unmute myself, that will just help this be a bit more efficient. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for that. You were well in time, by the way, and that's fantastic. So we appreciate a bit that you've shared with us, and I look to having a bit more of a back and forth dialogue after the other speakers, so that we can learn a bit more about the two-prong piece. You mentioned about being fire smart, but when you're already there and your town is still burning, what other pieces do we need to bring forward? Okay, so our next speaker coming from the north is Mayor Sarah Story. Go ahead, please, Mayor Story.
And good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. I am in Fraser Lake, and I'm smack in the middle of BC on the traditional territory of the Notley-Wet'en and the Slatin First Nations. We are about an hour and a half west of Prince George, and which is BC's northern capital, and we are surrounded by beautiful lakes, great people, and the great outdoors. And yes, that includes moose, and I will get to them in a minute. We are not used to having natural disasters so close to home, and I say that until about 2018, as we've seen our summers get hotter and hotter with climate change. Fraser Lake saw significant fires in 2018 and 2019. We were spared in 2020, and then we had a wet summer that year, and then this year we had more fires again. Each year we don't know what is in store for us, which causes anxiety as spring and summer approach. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of what has happened in the past so you guys can get a clearer picture. So in the summer of 2018, which was our worst years yet, the first fire started on June 21st, the first day of summer actually, and during our children's award ceremony for soccer, lightning hit close to town. We saw the lightning strike, and within 20 minutes, the fire had grown so large, the town instantly panicked. The Foster Creek fire, which was the name of the fire, took 7 days to contain. After that, it was fire after fire. The Dog Creek fire started after that on July 17th, promoting evacuations. The Shovel Lake fire started July 27th, and the Island Lake fire started August 1st. I remember standing on my parents' deck on Francois Lake and watching the Island Lake fire that had traveled 15 kilometers or 9.3 miles along the lake in one night. That's another story we likely don't have time for today, but I have to say wind can make or break you. Embers can travel far, and we learned how far on a few occasions. So that land mass with just those 4 fires was 112,000 hectares. And that is about 276,000 acres. And I'm using different comparisons for everybody because I know everybody uses different metric systems. So for comparison, that is bigger than Hong Kong, which is about only 250,000 hectares. And while we saw no loss of human life, the devastation of our forests, which impacts jobs and wildlife, took its toll. A few structures within the Notley-Wet'en's cultural camp at Ormond Lake within the Shovel Lake fire, and a few structures at the Island Lake fire were lost that year. That was just 2018. On May 12th, 2019 in spring, we had our first fire. This was really early for us. This was caused by a wintering fire that held its embers underground, and an intense wind pulled it out and spread it at an incredible speed. I started to receive messages about a fire just outside of Fraser Lake between our major employer, West Fraser Sawmills, and the Lejac site, which is in the Notley-Wet'en community. And that's about a 2-minute drive from Fraser Lake. I started making calls with a local RCMP officer while we were standing there, and we were in shock at how hard the wind was blowing and how fast the fire was moving. I tell you the story as we were standing there at a very pregnant friend's house, frustrated as we knew the power line was going to be hit. We were reporting the fire and letting the regional district know. We received a call from the Prince George Fire Center. I remember them saying, "Mayor Story, we're going to send a helicopter from Prince George to assess the situation." I said, no. I've already assessed the situation. You need to send the bombers. You need to send the bird dogs. There's no time. If you don't get the bombers here now, the power lines are going to be taken out. And they said, there's nothing we can do. This is how we do it. This is protocol. So off they went. And needless to say, the mayor has zero power. You realize that really quick when it comes to wildfires. And sure enough, the power lines were hit and out went the power. Luckily for us, the sawmill had a lot of equipment and resources to build fire lines. This year, there were wildfires of note above and below us again. The Cutoff Creek fire added more stress, and on August 4th, another fire started across the lake by lightning during our incredibly record-breaking hot summer. The plume quickly enlarged. I asked our fire chief to please check it out, and about 15 minutes later, we were hit with a torrential downpour like I've never seen before. Now, while this was much needed, for the first time in Fraser Lake's history, we were flooding. We had flooding at houses and businesses, and water pouring in and water coming up through the storm drains. The systems could not handle the amount of rain fast enough. Never have I seen floods and fires in one day, and never have we seen floods in Fraser Lake. Everyone was done with the air quality, the smoke, ash falling, and the fires threatening our communities. Some days look like nights. The mental health and anxiety during the wildfires was huge. Our children, seniors, and elders were trapped indoors. No one felt that they received the usual amount of vitamin D or the summer break that they're used to, not to mention adding COVID on top of it this year. We worked on mental wellness and debriefing in the community, especially in the schools. I spent weeks sharing updates, getting out accurate info, messaging everyone impacted to make sure they were holding up okay. We had a lot to be thankful for. Fire crews stepped up from other provinces in Canada and the world, including Mexico, New Zealand, and other places. Local businesses, volunteers, and individuals stepped up every day, including doing haircuts for the firefighters. The sheer devastation was so unreal. The entire community and others from the region came out to watch the fires or the bombers. It is not something you can explain or capture on footage, and the noise and popping when the fire met the water or seeing the trees candling was a spectacle of its own. A nightmare when you realize how small you really were and how Mother Nature was really in control, and we were just there as the bystanders. So what could we have done different or better? We could have got the fires out faster with faster response time, which is really crucial. The planting of broadleaf or deciduous trees to break up fast-running fires are great ideas. Fire rating levels, you need to stop forest activity like logging sooner, and that's something that we did see this year. Communication was the biggest thing when we talk about connectivity and the lack thereof with rural communities or elders that don't have access to it. Communication, is the biggest key, only because rumors spread faster than wildfires, and you need reliable sources and accurate and timely information. And the reason for this is it reduces panic. People want that constant, reliable source. Another thing just that we really need to see is funding our emergency support services, our ESS teams better. We can go into that later. Providing funding, more funding actually to FESBC. We can go over that a little bit too, but the more funding we get to work on fire mitigation, wildfire mitigation, and fire smarting communities and households helps just so many things. That includes bringing fiber from community forests like ours, where we harvest low quality stands, just into a better place. We can bring that fiber to pellet plants and paper and pulp plants and take it off the floors, the forest floors that are just so dry. And that really is a big, huge piece. There's so much that goes along with that. We have a lot of fallen trees because of the beetle kill in our forest in BC, and those fallen trees impact moose. So wolves trap moose a lot easier. We need to clean up the forest floors in many areas to help with that. And it also helps cleaning up those forest floors for soil erosion, fiber retention, and wildlife habitats. So the last two things I'm just going to mention are how to communicate with BC Wildfire Service and how they communicate on the prioritization of wildfires. Provincial parks are a perfect example. We can get into that a little bit further if we need to today too. And the last two things are just support and recognize the local knowledge within your region and area. The local knowledge is super important. And last, insurance issues outside fire protection zones and for equipment operators that are volunteering their equipment. There was a lot of problems around that. There's a lot to work on with those, and I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Story. Just in summarizing, what I picked up from you was sort of identifying the problem, recognizing that Mother Nature has her own mind when it comes to the work that she's doing. So that leaves us in a position where mitigation and preparedness is completely big. You've listed off many great examples there, as well as where we have opportunity for improvement in the future. I also just wanted to note that you shared a bit about the mental health and the anxiety, and how this also is another factor in communities as well. And that all impacts our quality of life and livability when you're in just that stressful time. As summer approaches, should be a time to relax. However, that isn't the case now. So we're going to move over to the coast, and I'd like to invite Mayor of Squamish, Mayor Elliott, to speak, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I just had to wait for the host to unmute me. I'm just going to share my screen here.
Mayor Elliott, are
Yeah,
you?
that doesn't seem to be working, Ilda. So do you have
I
my?
have, I have it on multiple participants. It's not working. Okay, let's see. We'll see. We'll pull up your, one moment.
You can see it now.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you. I am speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Okameo, Squamish Nation. The word Squamish translates roughly into mother of the wind. And since we're talking about BC forest fires, that can be a bit of a conundrum for us. It is quite windy here. But just to add a bit of context, Squamish is a town of 22,000 people. We're about an hour drive from Vancouver. So we do get a lot of people try and lump us in with this big urban center, but we are actually very separate from and still maintain our small town feel. We're surrounded by forest, as you can see by the picture. We have 5 river systems and we are on the ocean. We have a very large debris flow hazard that influences the development of our community because of a crumbly extinct volcano that sits to our north, and that's being exacerbated by extreme weather temperatures as well as extreme participation. So that risk grows for us. So we're very familiar with emergency management and risk mitigation here. And just in September, Howe Sound at Catsum, the fjord that we are located on, was named Canada's 19th UNESCO Biosphere Region. So we're really proud of that work and the collaboration that will come with that designation. So I'm hoping what my presentation today shows is, I guess, the role of towns to address both the practical when it comes to the climate emergency, as well as the visionary, and some of the things that we're learning from the fires. Next slide, please. So just to talk a little bit about our journey. So in 2019, Squamish declared a climate emergency. That was thanks to a lot of work by our civil society groups, our youth, who brought a resolution to council, which was approved. So in early 2020, we adopted our community climate action plan to drop our emissions by 45% by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. And you can see our 6 big moves are outlined there. Next slide. But our journey actually started in 2016. We commissioned a report on our adaptation requirements, both in the near term as well as in the long term. And as our First Nations governments pointed out, this diagram actually demonstrates 7-generation thinking. And you know, the big things that arise for us in the short term are sea level rise, extreme participation, and increased forest fire risk. And that has really become our reality. So we set to work on a very practical level. We developed an integrated flood hazard management plan to address both the extreme participation on our river systems as well as sea level rise, which produced an infrastructure requirement for diking and protection of $80 million over the next 20 years. And then we also created updated our wildfire protection plan in 2017. And that's really, that was eye-opening for us, because the fire season of 2017, 2018, while it didn't have a big impact where I live, we certainly saw the impact to our neighbors to the north. And it really created a lot of worry, and people started questioning, is Squamish ready? And so then in April of 2019, as well as April 2020, we had fires very close to us. Now, April is not fire season. That is springtime. It should still be very wet in our temperate rainforest here. And so again, the community was asking us questions. Are we ready to manage these kinds of threats? Next slide, please. So Squamish has one road in and out. There's a highway that runs north-south. And so together with our municipality to the north, Whistler, we developed a sea to sky multimodal evacuation plan. So how would we use rails, boats, airplanes, and as well as the road to evacuate? And it gave us some peace of mind because as we entered the 2018 fire season, we knew when we had to make the call to evacuate. And as a mayor, that I think is one of the most difficult decisions we'll ever be asked to make. And it's nice to know how many days I need to give our town to evacuate safely. Next slide. This also led to a real big education campaign. So once you have the evacuation guide, you have to let your community know how to evacuate and when to evacuate. So we have divided the community into zones, and we have identified muster points, and we have an ongoing campaign to get people to sign up to our Squamish alert system, to talk to them about what happens during evacuation and to prepare. Next slide, please. Another practical thing is we started community chipper days. So we bring the chipper, we bring the crew. People just need to bring out their tree clippings, brush that they've taken out of their yards to fire smart their yards. They're trying to create a 10-meter buffer between their home and flammable material. And we take that away once it's chipped to be composted. And we're moving that now. We've designated the most high-risk neighborhoods. So we're starting there and then moving through the community. But I think, next slide. One of the things that we've learned through the fire season is that we don't work in isolation. And so this past summer, we had crews from Squamish and Whistler join together and become structural protection units. They were sent, this group was sent up to the July Mountain Fire near Merritt, where they worked for 2 weeks and protected hundreds of structures and saved many structures. And that is a crew of all women. We're very proud of them. We got a lot of great phone calls from our neighbors thanking us for their help. So really the fire response in British Columbia now is not just regional, it's provincial. And I expect and would provide our crews, our emergency operations staff, wherever they're asked to go. I think that's how we have to operate now. Okay, next slide. I think when I speak about, so those are sort of the practical things that we're doing to make our community more resilient, to help our region be more resilient by sharing resources. But on the visionary side, just this past Tuesday, we gave third reading to a new wildfire development permit area. So this will be attached to our official community plan, and it establishes minimum standards for the interface setback, subdivision controls now related to interface fires, setbacks from steep slopes, which we have many of around Squamish. And then we have specifications for fire resistant building materials, including roofs, decks, and soffits, gutters, all those sorts of things to try and make sure our buildings are more resilient. And the development permit area, or a DPA, is divided into the primary zone and a secondary zone. So primary being the riskiest areas, secondary being a little less risk. As Sarah said, embers are a really big factor here. And since Squamish means mother of the wind, this is a real issue for us. We've also connected that to a wildfire landscaping management bylaw. We've basically prohibited, people here in my town love using juniper, cedar, and yew as hedges, but that's like putting matchsticks in your front yard next to your home. And so we have prohibited those now, and we'll give people the coming years to start to make the change to more broadleaf evergreen foliage for hedges.
We are
And
at time, Mayor Elliott.
Yep.
You good? Can we share a bit more after we've heard from all the speakers?
can I just do the next 2 slides? I just want to show people the scope of this.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
So this is the District of Squamish boundaries. And the next slide. This is where the development permit area applies, the red being the primary concern and the yellow being secondary areas. So it covers our entire community. And that is the threat we face every summer. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Some takeaways. I like how you share the practical planning points as well as the visionary ones, and also the engagement that you're working on with your residents. No one can really ignore a chip truck when it's coming down the road. So it provides an opportunity to communicate with residents what you're doing and why it's happening, and also to answer those questions around, are we prepared? And also, I think a key takeaway is that the plans are great, but you need to share them with the community. Otherwise, they're not useful when the time comes. And so just the work you've done around the evacuation planning. And then I'd like to hear a little bit more after on how you're communicating that out with residents and how that's going. So maybe there's a few things to follow up with again after our other speakers. Okay, next up, I'd like to call out Mayor Colin Ferguson from Silverton. Mayor Ferguson, are you here? You can turn your video on. Give a wave. Our host will unmute you.
Perhaps Mayor Tate, we could move to Mayor Gary Saltz. I think
Perfect.
Mayor Ferguson is having some difficulties.
Okay, let me know and we'll circle back. And Mayor Schultz from Revelstoke, welcome. And you're up a bit earlier, but if you could, I can see that you're here. If you could just turn your video on. There we go. We'll get you unmuted and the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm just trying to get the video. The video failed to start. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and I can't see you, but I can hear you for sure.
All right. If you're okay with me going, it keeps saying cannot start video. So I'm not sure why it was working earlier and not working now. So let me see. Start my video and it just keeps coming up. So if you're okay, I will just go ahead. I'm going to speak just briefly, kind of overall what's happened here in the province of BC, and apologize for the video not working, but that's technology.
Thank you.
There are numerous challenges that are universal in nature when a community battles disaster, be it natural or man-made. However, the challenges faced during a disaster are fluid, impacted by the disaster itself, the scope of it, and the people impacted. The massive fires that plagued British Columbia this past summer challenged our citizens, our communities, our leaders, and our tireless fire crews who worked to save homes and livelihoods. Communities were leveled, lives were lost, and thousands of people were displaced, traumatized, and feared. They feared the worst outcomes for their homes, their businesses, their pets, and their livestock. Thousands more waited on the knife edge of an evacuation alert, ready to flee when the order came. Having been involved with the BC Emergency Support Services program for several years, I understand firsthand the fear and concern in the eyes and voices of those evacuated and displaced. Assisting those in need is a privilege, yet a huge responsibility, and without teamwork and support, this work can never be done. Once the worst has passed, those evacuated are sent home, if there's a home to go to. Actions and decisions are scrutinized and recommendations are made. This is necessary and welcome as we learn from the past crisis to be better prepared for future crisis. I will speak briefly to the 3 spheres that challenged our province this past summer: communication, safety, and disruption. Credible, accurate, and rapid communication from official sources is the key to the safety and the security of people and property in any disaster response plan. The rapid spread of wildfire over in some cases thousands of hectares, created huge challenges for timely communication, especially in remote areas where internet access is unreliable or non-existent. Given the widespread use of social media, misinformation or confusing information can be spread as rapidly as the fire. As a recent study, Risk and Crisis Communication during wildfire events in British Columbia, published by Thompson Rivers University, researchers notes communication should be ongoing, robust, and well-established before disasters occur, so that reliable and rapid communication can happen during a crisis event. This can be as simple as ensuring that remote communities have satellite phones and established working relationships with officials and other communities in the area to have access to relevant local information. Unfortunately, we are a large province with many communities scattered at a great distance from each other, and even these simple tasks are not easily accomplished. The safety of fire crews and civilians is the #1 priority when attacking a wildfire. This summer, we saw some of the most extreme conditions that have ever been experienced in this province. Despite the deadly consequences of being trapped by a wildfire, invariably, as we witnessed this past summer, some people chose to stay and attempt to save their property from destruction. Ground and air fire crews are placed in unnecessary danger as they must now turn their efforts to saving the individual and away from controlling the blaze. This choice can have devastating impacts, including rampant wildfire growth and the risk of injury or worse to all involved. However, had some residents not stayed behind in the Monty Lake area to fight the fire on their own, further devastation would have occurred. A wildfire, or indeed any disaster, creates disruption on many levels. Evacuation, road closures, and devastation were a signal feature of our experience in British Columbia this past summer. As wildfires grew and containment became impossible in some situations, we saw the village of Lytton destroyed and residents rendered homeless in a matter of minutes. The Coquihalla Highway was closed for multiple days as crews battled the July mountain blaze. And by midsummer, the fires had impacted approximately 37,000 people, almost 6,000 of whom were under evacuation order, and almost 20,000 people had registered for emergency support services. This disruption caused by the wildfires is far-reaching, affecting the grocery store shelves of communities, the travel plans of tourists and residents alike, and of course, the longer-lasting mental and physical effects of those who had to flee in the face of such immediately life-threatening danger. Dense smoke affected most of the areas of our province, sometimes reaching levels of extreme health risk. The fact that we're still in a pandemic further complicates the search for relief from the smoke for many, particularly those with compromised breathing issues, which are often found they have no choice but to stay inside. Whatever the reasons for climate change, our world is continuing to change. And these types of catastrophic events are becoming more the norm than the exception. I believe that collectively we have realized it will take a concerted effort between agencies, governments, and citizens, along with money, resources, and out-of-the-box thinking to meet the human and environmental challenges that these reoccurring events will continue to deliver. So here in Revelstoke, we're a tourist community, but we're also resource-based. So we have lots of logging going on. And so we have our own tree farm license here, and we have to make sure that we're safe out in the woods to keep people safe. Many of our people, as they were out in the woods, spotted forest fires this year, and we were able to get them contained quickly. But having the tourists come from other communities meant that we need their dollars to support our community. And when we saw them canceling reservations because of the smoke or because of the fires in the area, it definitely proved to be a problem. That's really all the formal stuff that I have for you today, but I'll take any questions afterwards. Thank you. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you very much, Mayor Schultz. I really appreciate your perspective on that and how you've broken it down with communication, the safety, the disruption, and then provided information on all of those points. And again, just raising the how challenging it could be, and the need with communication, particularly even if you have every local signed up and engaged, you do have a tourist population that's coming in that may not know where to find that communication and be completely unfamiliar with what is in front of them as they're visiting. And also just talking more about the mental health and the impact that wildfire has on health with particulate and so forth. It's a challenge all in itself. So I just want to share with all, thank you very much, all of speakers for your presentations. I just want to share that Mayor Ferguson is not able, he's not joined in on the Zoom call. So that gives us a bit more time for the other speakers. Before we head into a Q&A, just a few points further that I'll share from my perspective here on the island. And also for those viewing us today, please use the chat box for any questions, and I'll keep an eye on that. And I also have some questions that I'll pose to the panelists, and also ask that if any of our speakers did run out of time, or there's always, oh, I should have said that, or I should have shared this, this would be a good time to hear from you as well. So sitting here on the island, we have had wildfires here on the island as well. However, we were fortunate this past year not to be impacted close to home by an actual event. However, we were familiar with what was happening, as we, of course, had evacuees or other residents from BC coming into our communities for a bit of reprieve from the wildfires. We also supported by sending our own trucks and equipment, and any firefighters available, we sent and dispatched out to help with what was happening on the mainland. For those of you watching, the challenges that small communities face with staffing up our fire departments is many rely on volunteers. So even in my own community, we only have 5 dedicated career firefighters. So these are firefighters that are employed, that are employees of the District of Sault. All other 35 are volunteers. And this isn't because we don't want more firefighters, it's because of cost pressures that local governments face. We're trying to maintain wastewater systems, water systems, roads, infrastructure, so forth. And our main form of revenue is property taxes. So there's also a mind to keep taxes affordable for our community while also delivering those services. We also have demands for more policing, more other supports, and we're constantly receiving cost pressures that are downloaded to us from the province, the federal government, school districts, and so forth. So there's regional districts and the like. So there's a lot of pressures, and then we're doing our best in the outcome to deliver the services that we need. The job of being a firefighter is extremely difficult. So our volunteers are taking time off from their families, their summer plans and the like, and are willing and able, they're wonderful people, to respond to the wildfires. When they come home, they are then responding to motor vehicle accidents, they're responding to medical calls, they're dealing with overdose deaths and the like. It's extremely challenging job, and there's a high demand and a need for training, which takes families, you know, like we need to support a family to have our firefighters available for the amounts of training that we have. So it's ongoing, and this is why we're all in it together. But I just wanted to share that this is another challenge here. Another event that occurred this summer was a heat dome. This brought in extremely hot temperatures. And so in my community, we were hitting 38, 39 degrees. And I know in other parts of the world that seems very cold maybe, but for us, it was extremely hot and 5 degrees above our normal with no break. And where this is a challenge is that our homes are not designed for this type of event. Many do not have air conditioning because it's not needed in our part of the world, and it didn't cool down at night. So that led to concerns for our seniors on folks getting dehydrated. Again, more ambulance calls to assist folks that were getting, that were suffering from health consequences as a result of this. And we expect more of this to come. I heard of, in some cases, infrastructure falling apart just under the extreme heat that we had. So it's another piece that we need to take into consideration as we plan and attempt to build resilient communities for the future. So it's another challenge that's coming our way. It was a tough time. At some point, I was chairing a council meeting. We're in a pandemic, so I'm chairing from my home, and I had my feet in a stew pot filled with water and ice just to try to stay cool as I focused on the meeting. And other people said, well, turn the sprinkler on or spray water. Well, if you're running technology, water's not your friend in that case. So it's just the reality. And again, I just want to thank my elected peers for all the work that you're doing. This is an extremely challenging job, but as you can see, we have so many dedicated, fine people stepping up to this challenge, doing it for a small stipend, but for the love of community and for a real passion and a desire to build healthy, vibrant communities for the future. We're doing this for our children. We're doing it because we care for everyone within our community, and it's a tough job sometimes. So I thank everyone for the work that they're doing. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is invite members of our speakers back, or panelists back. Just want to go around and just check to see if there's some other thoughts that you would like to share, that you may feel that you just wanted a bit more time to provide to the audience. And if there is, maybe just give a wave, and Mayor Schultz, maybe just speak. Mayor Stamer, I see you there. So I'll go to you with your hand up. Mayor Ward Stamer, please go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks very much. The presentation from the mayor from Squamish was fantastic. The one thing I wanted to add, and Mara is right about the small communities and volunteer fire departments, is at the regional district level, which I'm a member of, the TNRD, Thompson-Nicola Regional District. We've got one of the largest regional districts in BC, and of our 25 directors, 24 of those directors were either under an alert or an order this summer. So it affects every single community in our entire Thompson-Nicola Regional District. And we're going to be having meetings very quickly here with BC Wildfire Service, Deputy Minister of Forests, and those kinds of things. But one of the things I'd like to be able to talk about is having these, whether they're rapid attack trucks or responding type trucks, to be funded on a separate model than we're having right now. Maybe something where it's a year-round position, in as much as we have younger people that are fully trained. They're going to be, say, on those vehicles, being able to react to those lightning strikes and those kinds of things quicker. And say in the other 6 months, say at this time of the year, when now the fire season is wound down, they can either get additional training, they can get additional schooling. I'm not suggesting any unemployment insurance. I don't want to go down that road. And then to be able to have a situation where, let's say in a couple of years, if they decide they want to further on and go into the BC Wildfire Service and move up the ranks, or if they want to decide that, no, this isn't for me, I want to be a plumber, I want to be a welder, I want to go back to school, then we've got a system in place where we can have, school credits, those kinds of things. Because if you look at how much money we spent this last summer, there was a lot of opportunities where we could have probably, stopped big fires from occurring. We just did not have the resources on the ground. And I think we're just going to have to come up with a real good plan with the provincial government to be able to adequately fund this, so that we can feel, a whole lot safer than what we have right now, because we just don't have the resources. I mean, some of these smaller communities, even with their development plans and things like that, there's still an incredible amount of unburnt fuel that, like whether it's shrubs, trees, hedges, whatever it is, that can burn. And even the spacing of the housing, if we get those heat domes and everything is so hot, it doesn't matter what you have, you're going to burn everybody else's house when your house gets on fire. So I think that we've got some work to do, and that's what I would like to see is a different type of a funding model for these vehicles, for these trucks, even the volunteer firefighting, as much as if they're going to upgrade their systems so that we have a better way of funding it and not just coming directly from the taxpayers in those communities. Because as Maria said, we're limited to, our taxation base, and we just don't have the funds necessary to be able to get to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll go over to Worshipable Mayor Schultz, please.
Great, thank you, Maya. Thank you to Mayor Stamer and to yourself, Maya, for your comments on the fire department and the things that they're doing. We have the same thing here in Revelstoke, where we're all looking for more volunteers. We have 6 or 7 staff, but we also have the Trans-Canada Highway. So we have staff out there working the highway during tragic accidents, seeing things that most people should never see. When I spoke about communications, having a robust communication is an important thing. We were kind of behind the 8 ball this year in getting communication out, where members of our community were panicking when they saw smoke around the area with lightning strikes. Now, those were dealt with quickly. But one thing that our regional district did, the CSRD, which I sit on their board, is we subscribed to an app called Alertable, which helped get the communication out so people could put in their address and they could see the fires in the area. So it calmed things down, gave them a perspective of safety and or the idea that they needed to evacuate. So definitely there are ways that are inexpensive to get out to the community and have some robust communication. And it seems that everyone likes to do things electronically now, and that seemed to be the right way to go. So I'm grateful for the fact that we're able to come up with this app, subscribe to it, and get it moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Schultz. Mayor Elliott, would you like to add a bit more just around engagement with your community? And you had earlier in your comments shared how residents were reaching out to ask, like, are we prepared? Are we ready for this? So now that you've had some time doing some of the various programs and the evacuation planning, as well as dealing with things like the community chipper days, how is the engagement going in your community? What sort of things do you find is working very well? We need, oh.
All right. It's very hard not to be able to unmute yourself. I think, the biggest thing for us is to tell our community the truth. And so we tell them the truth about climate change from an adaptation point of view, but it's not to scare them, it's to prepare them. And then the other thing that we're really focusing on now is the care. Because the mental health issues in small communities now, because of the constant stress of these emergencies. So fires and flooding and pandemics, they're all on top of each other. And so our communities are low on mental health resources and high on need. So I think that's the other piece we're adding to it. So we want to make it as easy as possible. So we produce a lot of educational materials. So with this new landscaping guidelines and the wildfire DPA, we have a whole booklet of, here are the plants you can plant, right? Like, make it easy for people to make the decisions. And we're talking to our local retailers that sell plants to try and get more of the product that we want to see there. We're really trying to, we know that people feel anxious when they're worried, but they feel empowered when they're in action. And so much of what we do is trying to move people into a sense of empowerment. Like, I know what to do and I can take that action. Because I think my colleagues would agree, when people are just worried, they get really, really stuck in that place. So we're always trying to find those ways to build up our community's agency. So it's not just us. And I think this is why we take a broader regional approach now in our thinking, that it's not just about our resiliency, it's about making sure that Whistler and Pemberton and Lillooet, that we can share resources. We bought equipment with Whistler, a structural protection unit that we share with them. Hopefully we both don't need it at the same time. But there's still barriers to that support that Sarah spoke to. And I think the other thing we try and engage our community with, around some of the harder decisions about putting these new building requirements across the town and landscaping requirements, is that this is our opportunity now for every new home to be built better, to hit a higher bar, to be more resilient. Every home that gets built without this level of fire protection or lower GHGs or building, more walkable, inclusive communities, it's a lost opportunity. And when you're a growing town like ours, every building matters. And so I think it's that balance between moving quickly and making sure our community is coming along with us in a way that they feel like they still have choice and they still feel part of the decision.
Thank you for sharing that, Mayor Elliott. What I appreciate is just recognizing the human component, to prepare and care, not to scare. I know that's kind of rhyming a lot, but it is the case. If there's too much worry, everyone's getting stuck, and then it's too big of a problem to even know where to begin. But finding ways that keep everyone together, to bring the community forward, and to find pieces that every household can take on is individual action. It is empowering. And so thank you for sharing that with us. Mayor Story, any other thoughts to add or that you would like to elaborate a bit more on? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a few. I mean, there's been so much great information even I've got today from different things, but there was a lot of collaboration, and I think collaboration is the biggest key with that coincides with communication. But in Fraser Lake, the Notley-Wet'suwet'en and the Slatin First Nations built a fire training center. They purchased an SPU, a sprinkler protection unit, together. That's why we saved so many houses and so many structures in our region and our area. So just looking at those collaborative ideas are really, I think, key priorities with all communities, because you're protecting each other. And then that SPU also went out and was used at fires this year and the year before in other communities. So just having those resources and sharing them, I think, is an important thing to note. And a few other things that we've learned from this year with the heat dome, and I appreciate you bringing that up. It was in my notes, but I talked too much, Maya, already, so we couldn't go too far into that today. But when we talk about the heat dome and what we were seeing, in central BC is really, where do people go when it's too hot? You don't have air conditioning, cooling centers or something that had come out of this, and where and who's going to host those? And then you have COVID on top of it, but filtered air, we don't think about that. You have elders that are in their houses that can't handle the smoke in some of the communities. And I know in one year in particular, we had to evacuate elders out of the Slatin First Nations. They just had to be evacuated. They couldn't stay in the community because the smoke was so bad. So just recognizing that sometimes the fire may not be what evacuates you, it might be air quality. And then we had things like social isolation. What did that look like for people? And that is something that we're recognizing, not just with fires, but with COVID as well. And just how we are looking at technology and the capabilities we have right now, whether it's with Zoom and doing this the way we're doing it, it's part and parcel of what we're kind of looking at with climate change. And unfortunately that did involve COVID, but it's just kind of what we've seen is how are we going to help and make sure our elders and our seniors are protected and taken care of, and their mental health is good as well. A few other things are, insurance issues were a huge thing. So if you wanted to buy a house in the middle of fire season, I call it not summer anymore, I call it fire season. What does that look like? If a fire is within 60 kilometers of where you're purchasing a house, you might not be able to get insurance. That was impactful. And then if you live in the regional district, you're not in a fire protection zone, getting insurance to begin with is very, very costly and expensive if you don't have fire protection. So we saw a lot of those issues. I just wanted to highlight them a bit, that there's things that are happening. I did hear yesterday at the regional district meeting I was attending that there is one insurance company that is actually looking at houses that have fire smarted. So places like Squamish, where Mayor Elliott was saying, you know, if they've removed all this debris from 10 meters, we will, you know, that's great. You've fire smarted your house. You've done all these things. Well, there's not many insurance companies that look at that and say, okay, yeah, we'll give you a discount on your insurance, or we'll insure your house, or whatever that looks like. But there is one insurance company, I don't have the name of it, but I can find that, that apparently is going to insure houses in a different light, where you have done that due diligence and fire smarted around your place. So yeah, I thought I would just add those, and I'm sure I have a lot more to say, but I'll leave it there so everybody else can speak too. Hopefully there's some questions from everybody else.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Story. And just a reminder to the viewing audience, if you do have a question, please put it in the chat box and I'll see that come up. There's just one question I'd like to put forward is, some of our speakers today have talked about how they're collaborating with neighboring municipalities in the sharing of resources. So I'd like to ask a bit about that a bit more. So this is obviously, I think, more grassroots. It's local governments recognizing a problem, working with their mutual partners, their neighbors, to address it. Or is there another network that I'm not familiar with that's helping to facilitate this? Or is it the case where mayor to mayor, you've just reached out and done this on your peer, like with your neighbors? Okay, Mayor Stamer, please.
Thanks. Yes, we've had a mutual aid agreement with our surrounding fire departments, SIMP First Nations to the north of us, 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, and then also with Littleford and McClure. And that's probably because of being under the TNRD umbrella. We have our fire district in our district of barrier goes outside our municipal boundaries, and as such, the regional district picks up 40% of the annual operating expenses of our fire department. So we do a lot of cost saving things with the other fire departments as well, whether it's training, sharing of resources. We've got really good contacts with the fire chiefs, particularly with SIMP, with Ron Lampro, with their fire chief, with our fire chief, Chief Walgamuth. And so we have those contacts, we have those, those concerns, those discussions all the time. They've been successful in being able to purchase two, as I mentioned, two brand new trucks that are coming specifically for wildfire actions, lightning strikes, those kinds of things. And they have an incredible fuel load in their neighborhood or their reserve as well. They've got lots of high grasses, and they haven't been that successful in trying to encourage all the residents to get on board with some of the fire smarting recommendations, but they're trying their very best to do that. And we're doing the same here. So that's what we've done. And going forward, we've also had interface with the BC Wildfire Service. And again, like I mentioned, we had a lightning strike early in the season, earlier than we normally had in June, just outside our boundaries. They went through the protocols, they actioned it. They got BC Wildfire Service on board. We were able to action it with a helicopter, and with all the combined forces, we were able to snuff it out very quickly. And that's what I was suggesting is, that's important. And also with the communication, I think we have to make sure that we're protecting our infrastructure. And what happened down in the canyon with Lytton, and that is when they lost their cell service, and we've got our residents that are using the Buoyant app or similar apps for information. We've got to make sure that we've got mobile cell towers up and ready and running as quickly as we possibly can, because we now have our residents relying so much on that level of communication that we certainly don't want to lose that. So that's what we've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Over to Mayor Elliott, please.
Thanks. I'm going to give a lot of credit to all the staff that work for municipalities, because in the fire seasons of 2017 and 2018, we had like tens of thousands of people on the move, being evacuated, going into different communities. And I think what elected officials, but as well as our staff, are seeing is that you can't do this alone. And you're either going to be fighting the emergency or you're going to be receiving people that are now impacted by an emergency from your neighbors. So I think it's a natural extension then to think, okay, how do we make ourselves more resilient, potentially less dependent in the short term? Like I've had mayors say to me, in the first 7 days, don't expect a lot of help to show up from the province. Like you're kind of on your own if there's a big fire. And so I think this is where our regional structure of governance becomes so important, because that's a table at which you're all talking about the same sorts of struggles and funding issues around fire smarting communities and addressing the key areas in your wildfire management plan. So I think, those kinds of things like joint evacuation exercises, tabletop exercises, starting to buy equipment together, looking at sharing of resources and evacuation plans from all over the province. So at first I sort of thought we could just be thinking within our region, but now our staff are getting pulled into the interior, to the emergency operations centers, just to give people there a break, because the emergency through the summer is unrelenting. And so at one point this summer, we were told by the province, we don't have any more resources. So if you have a fire, sorry, like we're completely engaged. And then we had a fire breakout just to our south. Unfortunately, we were able to muster some other support. So I think at the same time, we're seeing this mobilization province-wide. Small communities are still realizing that they've got to figure out, how do we train our own neighbors that are in the more rural areas around our communities? How do we work with First Nations? What's the plan for us if we can't mobilize a provincial response quickly enough? And so I think that's the reality that we're living in right now. The emergencies are going to be there every summer.
Thank you. So in terms of a question that's on my form here, it says, who has the resources? So to our speakers, is it fair to say that the resources are owned and managed by local governments? As Mayor Elliott said, the province has some resources, but they did run short of those. And that leaves it's the local communities then that need to ensure they have the resources in place. Is that fair? Mayor Story, and then I'll go to Mayor Stamer, please.
Yeah, what we've typically seen and what happens here is the regional district holds most of the power. They have the maps. That's where the EOC, the main EOC is. I mean, yeah, they partner with the municipality and they meet with the, my CAO, and they meet with the fire department, and they meet with the RCMP and have plans of attack on how to, evacuate or work on this or work on that, and whatever that might look like, whether it's knocking on doors. But really, from the regional district of Bulkley to Chaco, the mapping, a lot of the orders that are created with the maps, it all comes from there. And then, and then it goes from that to whether a municipality wants to listen. So that's where they can go, okay, we can sign the alert, or we can sign the evacuation order. And we've seen this in our area, some of the First Nation communities also have, different views on that. It's like, no, we're not issuing an alert. Just because the regional district helps with that and has a lot of those resources, doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to want to follow them quite like that. But majority of all of the work from my area comes from the regional district, because most of the fires are in the regional district. So it depends on which side, the Prince George side or the Burns Lake side, but it's different every day, and every fire is different, and the different resources that we're seeing are obviously very different. It depends on how big the fires are and how many people are coming in. We've had 1,000-person camps living at the soccer field, so it's and that's right in town, and it really just depends on so much and what the resources that the province is sending out. If the fires are close to a community or they're in a provincial park, it really just looks a lot different each situation, and you just don't know. And then What we saw this year is it looked really different because there were so many fires. There were so many problems going on that everybody was impacted. And so then it's a triage. What's your biggest priority? Well, it's going to be the communities that are the biggest communities, that have the most expensive houses, that have the most life to save. So you're going to let those bigger fires that may be in the regional district that are closer to a provincial park, like closer to Fraser Lake, you're going to let those go and hope that they're not going to get so big they're going to take out a community. Yeah, so there's just so much that goes along with it. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mayor Story. So what I'm hearing is it really depends on the fire and where it started.
Yeah,
It
or the natural disaster. Let's just say it's not
Yes.
just the fire, right? It could
Lightning.
be, yeah, it's just so many things with a heat dome, for instance. That was completely different. We didn't have a state of emergency called for that, where we should have. If we'd had that, we might have been able to pull staff off things. When I have only 5 staff members at my municipality, and I have to say, well, you know what, you guys have to stop everything you're doing. I know we're working on connectivity right now and this and this and this, and we have 6,000 projects we're doing this summer, but I need you guys to go and open a cooling center at the arena instead. That is almost impossible for a staff of 5 people. So and then flooding. Who knew we had flooding in Fraser Lake? That's not a thing. So then it's like pulling, you just don't know from each natural disaster to the next. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Story. Mayor Stammer?
Thanks for that. Yes, I agree with the mayor. Jurisdiction is a big deal, is a big point. And that's kind of a bone of contention that we're going to be discussing with the BC Wildlife Service in a couple of weeks, in as much as that when we talk about lack of resources and the fact that the Forest Service can't act on some of these fires, a lot of it is because we used to have a reliance of the mom and pops, the ranchers, the smaller contractors that were part of a registry system that we'd have in the spring. And so that you could rely on them to action these fires. Well, that's all changed now. And I'm going to be asking for that to be reinstated. If there's insurance issues, we're going to cover that. If there's training issues, we're going to cover that. It makes absolutely no sense at all to have a lightning strike and a fire start and be the size of your pickup or larger and be told that, no, you can't action that for a day, 2 days, 3 days. Next thing you know, the thing is a project fire. Whoops, oh, gee, I guess it's too bad we didn't have the resources to act on that fire. And I'm not being facetious, but that happened a lot last summer. And so there's a lot of people that are upset about that. And we have the tools necessary and they wouldn't allow us to use them. In our jurisdiction, in our municipality, absolutely. We can do what we want. But a lot of times, as they mentioned, a lot of these fires are in the regional district. They're out in the Crown lands. And they were told explicitly, do not touch them. So we've got to get something straight before next fire season on how we can get these people that have resources, that have training, to get them back in the game. And again, like I said, if it's an insurance issue, we get that figured out. I was a logging contractor for over 40 years. So I get how we can do those kinds of things. But, to be able to turn around and have people that want to protect their livelihoods and to be told to stand down because either A, they don't have additional resources or supervision to come and help them is ridiculous. And so that's where I'm pushing, is that we've got to get this. We've got a few months before the next fire season to be able to get back to what we used to do in the past, because what we're doing right now isn't working. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Your Worship. There's a few questions in the one's been answered. It was, does BC get enough snow rain during the fall, winter, spring, or is this contributing to the issue? Mayor Elliott had replied that our weather patterns have started to change, the biggest being warmer spring, so the snowpack in our mountains is melting faster, and therefore forests in her area dry out earlier in the summer, and their summers are hotter and drier from what it was back in the 2000s. So yeah, I think to that question as well, it really depends on where you are in BC. We're a very diverse, very large province. And so in my neck of the woods here, it's exactly this. We get more water and rain in the wintertime and hotter and drier in the summer. But what that means is that hotter temperatures and the infrastructure, that we're not just prepared for the hotter temperatures that are coming our way. And not everyone, even in my community of under 15,000, is on piped water. Many are still on well systems in more rural parts. and their wells are running dry and they're needing to truck in water. Also, there's a lot of invasive plants in our community that ignite very quickly in the dry summer. So Scotch broom, it's an invasive plant. It's everywhere here. It's very oily and it lights up very quickly and it burns underground for days. And so sometimes fires are not even above surface, they're deep underground and they're spreading underground. Also, what makes this complicated is with the wetter seasons, some communities go from putting out the fire to immediately dealing with a mudslide, because there's a rock slide that happens, there's mudslides, their emergency operation centers are still active now because of mudslides and just flash flooding that's happening. So it's one event to another event, and then the dryness comes in again. You may recall in 2010, BC hosted the Winter Olympics and there wasn't enough snow. It had to be trucked in from other places. And then in some cases, our ski hill on the mountain didn't open, and other times it opens early and there's a longer season. So it is changing, and that's just making it a bit more complicated. Mayor Story says they're not getting as much snow, hardly any rain, very hot summers are not helping. And that certainly is the case here. We sometimes have no rain from April all the way through to the end of October. There's absolutely no rain. And so any spark, any event can immediately cause an emergency that we need to attend to. There was another question in here. It says, the climate action plan that Squamish is putting in place includes efforts to mitigate the climate crisis, address the root cause of increased environmental disasters such as forest fires and flooding, and proactively ensures the community remains livable for future generations. How do we move all towns towards implementing climate action plans that include not only adaptive responses, but also recognize that our municipalities must lead in reducing our community's greenhouse gas emissions and limit the potential impacts of climate change? So how do we move all towns towards implementing this? Mayor Story mentioned the Union of BC Municipalities. This organization represents all local governments in BC and has an AGM annually, of which there's an opportunity where we share best practices and showcase places like Squamish and the fabulous work that we're doing. It's up to local governments and their elected representatives to do this work. And we see more and more of this occurring throughout the province. However, I'll share in my community, we're only just in the process of developing a climate action plan for the first time. And only now are we starting our wild smart planning for the first time. This area has been settled for 150 years, but only incorporated since 1999. So sometimes it takes time to get these priorities in place. But maybe Mayor Elliott, would you like to respond to that question there?
Thank you. It's a really good question, and I think it will vary from community to community. And I think, you know, for us, we had very strong civil society organizations and a really dynamic group of youth that worked with some of our progressive councillors to bring forward the climate emergency resolution and put deadlines on how quickly that plan needed to be brought forward. So I think, you know, it's so important to bring people with you and meet your community where it's at. And so that's going to be different for every one of us. You know, we made a major rezoning change to get fossil fuels out of our houses last year, and our new houses. And not one person spoke against it at the public hearing, even though it represents potentially higher operating costs for some people. So I think it goes to show that there is support out there for climate action. But I think each community has to start with what their community cares about, what they can get behind, so that you can build the momentum to take some of the bolder moves that Squamish is now in a position to take. But I think you know, the politicians can't do it alone. It really takes that collaboration. I can say though that the bolder we are, the more we talk about our carbon neutral future, the more the opportunities show up to partner with academia, to partner with private industry, or to receive funding for the work that we're doing. And again, we're doing that in collaboration with our neighbors in the regional district, and finding ways so that we're not all inventing the wheel. We're doing projects together, whether that's electric vehicle infrastructure, or now with Whistler, we just got funding to do an embodied carbon in buildings study so that we can produce a guide for all BC municipalities. So again, it's about working together, finding where the energy is, and being really bold about where you want to go with your vision. And it brings people along with you.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. We are reaching the end of our session time that we have, so I just wanted to provide a few closing comments. Firstly, I wish to thank all of our speakers for taking the time to join with us virtually today, for putting together your presentations and for sharing them, and really bringing forward a lot of great ideas, what we learned, where we need to go into the future. There were some questions a bit about what can be done and have we made the most of what already exists, regardless of who owns it. And I think what this shows is local governments certainly have, though we need strength and support through the province to action some things out. We even heard from another island community in the chat here that federal support was needed. Local governments are the closest to the people. I shared that in my opening, and it's because we're very nimble. We live and work in the same areas our constituents do. We have conversations in grocery and hardware store aisles, and we're connected in this way, and we're advancing a lot of wonderful work. But it takes everyone together to do this. And so it's mobilizing the work that's being done by our citizens and advocating through to the province. We know there's items we can't control, like thunder and lightning and wind. My community has been saved only because the wind blew the other direction that day. Otherwise, there would have been devastating loss in our community. It was a bit of a wake-up call, but then as life gets back to normal, you continue on doing what what you need to do. We're in an earthquake place, and there's always information on how to build the earthquake preparedness kit. But over time, you start to pull from it because you need that extra roll of toilet paper in your spare room or whatever, and it's easy to get distracted. And this is a complicated time. What I've seen emerge over over the decade that I've served is also an understanding of the impact that mental health and health have. And we're having this conversation now for the first time because we know these are, again, coming from our community, and that they're complicated, and we need more help with the resources that we need to deliver the services. So what I'd like to share with the group is local governments are on it. We're working together through either a regional district, mutual aid partners, or also with our neighboring communities. We're advocating to the province. We have a good friend in municipal affairs, being a former mayor of Tofino, that understands the challenges local governments face. And we need to start talking today about what wildfire next year is going to look like. Sometimes nothing happens, but that's only the stroke of luck. I will put together some materials to give back to the organizers. I have several pages of notes here, but I just want to leave it that BC is a very diverse place. As you know, there's no one size fits all, but what we see in local government is desire to come together, to work together, and to certainly build not only for today and for the future. So I'd like to thank the audience for listening today, all the speakers again for their presentations, and I wish you all the very best. Stay well and be strong, be healthy, and take bold actions. Thank you.